Korean Airlines Flight 007, September 1st, 1983. This is a flight that originated in New York and was designated to go to Stevens International Airport in Anchorage, Alaska. There, pick up a few more passengers, let some passengers out, refuel, and then on its way across Alaska, and then on to Seoul, Korea. That was its flight plan. It had 269 occupants, which included, of course, the crew, the flight crew, cabin crew, deadheading employees stationed elsewhere by Korean Airlines, and the passengers. The passengers included 22 children under the age of 12. Here's a quote by Andrei Sakharov. He's the Soviet Union physicist who fathered the Soviet nuclear bomb, and he was later on a civil rights activist. I've always thought that the most powerful weapon in the world was the bomb, and that's why I gave it to my people. But I've come to the conclusion that the most powerful weapon in the world is not the bomb, but it's the truth. 1983 was in the midst of the Cold War. During the Cold War, many horrendous incidents occurred. One of them was the Marine barracks bombing of Beirut on October 23, which saw the taking of 241 Marines and more than 300 people altogether. Another one was the United States invasion of Grenada, which occurred on October 25, and that was Operation Urgent Fury. But the most memorable of any of the Cold War events was the downing by the Soviets of Korean Airlines Flight 007 on September 1st, 1983. This is considered the second most dangerous event of the Cold War, the first one being the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. This is the youngest passenger of KAL-007, Sami Ariadich. He was 8 months old, and he was being taken by his mother Diane to Thailand to spend the time with his father Lek. The pilot was Captain Chun Byung-in, the backup pilot for the President of Korea. He had 10,000 hours logged on passenger jets. But the most famous passenger was Congressman Larry McDonald from Georgia. He was the president of the John Birch Society. He was touted to be a candidate for the presidency of the United States. He was a urologist, and he was an expert in Soviet nuclear capabilities. And he was on his way to Seoul, Korea, for the commemoration of the 30-year Mutual Defense Treaty between the United States and Korea. Behind KAL-007 was another Korean Airlines jet traveling 15 minutes behind. It was KAL-015, and it was carrying other congressmen to the same place that Larry McDonald was destined to go. Aboard that plane were Senators Stuart Sims and Jesse Helms and Congressman Carol Hubbard, a representative from Kentucky. This plane arrived at its destination. Korean Flight 007 was not to arrive. The flight plan of KAL-007 took it across Alaska, and you can see the intended flight plan in blue. This is what it was supposed to go. And here is in red where it actually went. And you can see that the distance between the two is about 625 kilometers or 390 miles, a 390-mile deviation. The flight plan that it actually flew took it over the Kamchatka Peninsula. And here you can see the Kamchatka Peninsula. crossing near the capital city of Kamchatka, which was Petropavlovsk. Petropavlovsk, and indeed all of Kamchatka, was bristling with weaponry. Petropavlovsk was an area around which there were numerous military airfields, and it was a Soviet nuclear submarine base. This indeed was the worst time, the worst place for KL-07 to traverse. And north of Petropavlovsk in Kamchatka was the Klyuchi target range. This is the target range for intercontinental missile ballistic launches, which were made from the northwest of the Soviet Union, from Plesetsk in Murmansk. At that night, of all nights, was the most dangerous night for KL-07 to traverse this area, because this was the night that the Soviet Union was to launch from Plesetsk the SS-25. The SS-25 was the first mobile missile made. It was the prototype of all subsequent missiles, including the missiles that were fired over Israel and over India by Pakistan, the Scud missiles. It was to travel from Plesetsk to the Klyuchi target range, and there at that time it was to explode, and the telemetry, that is all the parameters of that missile launch, was being monitored by the Soviet Union and also by a U.S. reconnaissance plane, an RC-135, which is off the coast of Petropavlovsk. And here we see in red the actual flight plan. The plane KL-07 traversed the Kamchatka Peninsula and actually went over an island, Sakhalin Island. That's the long island, which is over 500 miles long, and was shot down in international waters over or near Moniron Island, a 3.5 by 4.5 mile long island. Here you see KL-07 coming from the northeast across Sakhalin, coming from Turpany Bay at a 240-degree angle, and coming across Sakhalin to Moniron Island. And before it gets to Moniron Island, it makes a turn to the north. So that turn to the north is what puts it at Moniron Island, and it indicates that the turn was intentional. Here we see at the same altitude that it actually was, what it would have looked like if the pilots could see, crossing Sakhalin Island over to Moniron Island, where it was shot down. KL-07 had just passed through Kamchatka and out into the international waters of the Okhotsk Sea, and it continued on its way toward Sakhalin Island. But right after it had passed through Kamchatka and into the Sea of Okhotsk, it was picked up by Soviet radar, and the Soviets sent an interceptor to try to locate it, and succeeded in locating it, and then to fall in behind it, and this began the stalking of KL-07. Here are the transcripts of it. 1996, in a New York Times interview on September 9th, Gennady Osipovich, the pilot of the Sukhoi 15 that fired upon KAL-07, admitted that he knew that KAL-07 was a passenger plane, and he knew this because of the windows. I saw 2 rows of windows, he said, and knew that this was a Boeing. I knew this was a civilian plane, but for me this meant nothing. It is easy to turn a civilian type of plane into one for military use. These are the transcripts of the actual shoot-down of Korean Airlines Flight 007. You'll hear the voice, or you'll see on the transcripts General Anatoly Kornikov, Lieutenant Colonel Titovna, the flight controller, and Major Osipovich in the actual shooting down of KAL-07.
Carry out the task. Destroy it.
The target is decreasing speed. I'm going around it. I'm already moving in front of the target.
Increase speed, 805.
I have increased speed.
Has the target increased speed? Yes?
No, it is decreasing speed.
805, open fire on target.
It should have been earlier. How can I chase it? I'm already a beam of the target.
Roger. If possible, take up a position for attack.
Now I have to fall back a bit from the target.
Oh, how long does it take him to get into attack position? He is already getting into neutral orders. Engage afterburner immediately. Bring in the MiG-23 as well. While you are wasting time, it will fly right out.
805, try to destroy the target with cannons.
I am dropping back. Now I will try a rocket.
Roger.
12 kilometers to the target. I see both.
805, approach target and destroy target.
Roger. I am in lock-on.
805, are you closing on target?
I am closing on the target. Am in lock-on. Distance to target is 8 kilometers.
Afterburner. Afterburner, 805.
I have already switched it on.
Launch.
I have executed the launch. The target is destroyed.
Break off attack to the right, heading 360.
I am breaking off attack.
Well, what the world thought is that the explosion was instantaneous. KAL-07 swirled down to the ground, or tumbled to the ground, came down in pieces. This is what the world thought, and here you see a picture from Time magazine. An imaginative impression is given that that's it. There is no possibility that there would be any survivors. But here's what really happened. Here you see the graph of the altitude of KAL-07 right after the attack, and that's in red, and then the position of the nose, whether the plane is pitched up or pitched down, and they're coordinated so you can see them. They're products of the cockpit voice recorder, that is it, and the digital flight data recorder. And you'll see that the pilots are struggling to cause the plane to start descending. Now the reason is that the missile that did exploded 50 meters behind KAL-07, and sending forth the shrapnel that cut the cables of the elevator of the plane, and that caused the plane to rise from 35,000 feet to 38,250 feet. Then at a certain point you will see that the pitch shows us that the nose starts to come down while the altitude is still going up. The reason why the nose starts to go down is that the pilot has taken it out of autopilot and is now manually at the controls and successfully bringing it down. Then you can see from the nose up, the pitch blue line, that at a certain point the pilot sharply brings up the nose of the plane, and at that point, at a certain point, you see that the plane is actually at a very gentle descent, with both the altitude red line and the pitch blue line then going in tandem.
What happened?
What?
Retard throttles.
Engines normal, sir.
Altitude is going up. Altitude is going up. Speed brake is coming out.
What? What?
Check it out.
I am not able to drop altitude. Now unable.
Altitude is going up. This is not working. This is not working. Manually.
Cannot do manually. Not working manually also. Engines are normal, sir.
Is it power compression?
Is that right?
All or both?
Is that right?
Tokyo Radio, Korean Air 007.
Korean Air 007 Tokyo.
Roger, Korean Air 007. We are experiencing rapid compressions. Descent to 10,000.
Now we have to set this. Speed. Stand by, stand by, stand by, stand by, set.
Here we see KL-07 continuing its flight after it was attacked at 5,000 meters and as it approaches Monument Island. It makes a maneuver. It makes a turn to the north, and it looks like this is an intentional turn because it puts it directly over Monument Island. It continues onto Monument Island, and then at 5,000 feet, it begins a spiral descent around Monument Island. And here you see this conversation with General Anatoly Kornikov being the main speaker. He's the commander of Sokol Air Force Base, from which the Sukhoi 15 took off.
Do you see the target on the screen?
We can see for the moment.
Did he fire both missiles or one?
Both missiles.
Bring in the MiG-23. Gerasimenko,
Yes.
this is the task. Bring the MiG-23 in to destroy the target.
Yes, sir.
Gerasimenko,
163 has been ordered to engage afterburner. We are bringing him to attack position.
Roger. Did Osipovich see the missiles explode? Hello.
He fired 2 missiles.
Ask him. Ask him yourself. Get on the Channel 3 and ask Osipovich. Did he do or did he not see the explosions?
Right away.
Titovning. Well, what is happening?
Nothing for the moment.
Well, what is happening? What is the matter? Who guided him in? He's locked on. Why didn't he shoot it down?
They fired. They fired. We are now waiting for the result, Comrade Colonel. The target turned to the north.
The target turned to the north.
Affirmative.
Bring the 23 in to destroy it.
Comrade, right turn.
Well, I understand. I do not understand the result. Why is the target flying? Missiles were fired. Why is the target flying? Well, what is happening?
Yes.
Well, I am asking. Give the order to the controller. What is wrong with you there? Have you lost your tongues?
Comrade General, I gave the order to the Chief of Staff to the controller, and the controller is giving the order to...
Well, how long does it take for this information to get through? Well, what? You cannot ask the results of firing the missiles? Where? What? Did he not understand, or what? Tell 23, afterburner, open fire, destroy the target, then land at home base.
Roger.
Altitude. What is the altitude of our fighter and the altitude of the target? Quickly, the altitude of the target and the altitude of the fighter. Why don't you say anything? Gerasimenko.
Gerasimenko, altitude is 5,000.
5,000 already?
Affirmative. Turning left, right, apparently it is descending.
Destroy it. Use the 23 to destroy it, I said.
Roger. Destroy it.
Well, where is the fighter? How far from the target?
Comrade General, they cannot see the target.
They cannot see the target? Oh, well, you know the range where the target is. It is over Moniron.
They lost the target, Comrade Colonel, in the area of Moneron.
In the area of Moderon?
The pirates do not see it, neither the one nor the other. The radio forces have reported. RTF has reported that after the launch, the target entered a right turn over Moneron,
Uh-huh.
descending and lost over Moneron.
So, the task. They say it has violated the state border again now.
Well, it is the area of Moneron, of course, over our territory.
Get it. Get it. Go ahead, bring in the MiG-23.
Roger, the MiG-23 is in that area. It is descending to 5,000 meters. The order has been given. Destroy upon detection.
There were at least 2 Soviet rescue operations sent out within minutes of KAL-007's downing. These missions are documented in the Russian ground-to-ground telecommunications transcripts, and in view of the specificity of KAL-007's location, there is no reason to doubt their success. The first mission involved rescue helicopters, border guards, and the KGB, and was ordered at 1847, just 21 minutes after missile impact and 9 minutes after KAL-007 had reached point zero altitude. Point zero being when it went below radar, not when it landed or impacted.
You don't have the sunrise there yet.
No, it will be in about 30 minutes.
Prepare whatever helicopters there are. Rescue helicopters.
Rescue?
Yes, and there will probably be a task set for the area where the target was lost.
Roger. Is it to be done through your SAR?
Huh?
Assign the task to Chaika through your SAR, Comrade Colonel. Khomutovo does not come under us, and neither does Novoalexandrovska. We have nothing here.
Very well.
Novoalexandrovska must be brought to readiness, and Khomutovo. The border guards and the KGB are at Khomutovo.
Hello. Hello, Titovnin. I'll lock you up in the guardhouse. Why don't you pick up the phone?
Comrade General, everyone was busy here.
You have nothing there to be busy with. Busy? What kind of nonsense is that? So, where's Kornyakov?
Kornyakov is here.
Put him on the phone.
1 minute. He is reporting to Kamensky, Comrade General.
So, what you need to do now? Contact these sailors, what do you...
Border guards?
Huh?
Border guards.
Well, the civilian sailors.
Understood.
The border guards. What ships do we now have near Moniron Island? If they are civilians, send them there immediately.
Understood, Comrade General. Here we have a map of the set-down area of KAL-07 after it was shot down. And we see the main island of Sakhalin, more than 500 miles in length. And then we see Moniron Island, and that's the island about which KAL-07 made a spiral descent downward and landed close to that island. And here we see the mainland, the Siberian maritime part of the USSR that is right across from the Sakhalin Island. And here we see Japan. That's the northern island of Hokkaido, and there's the Wakanai beach, in which some of the debris of KAL-07 either floated down or was planted by the Soviets. Those are the 4 main areas. And here we see at that yellow star explosion, the beach area in which some of that debris landed. And these arrows show you something very significant of how the debris might have gotten there. Those arrows point upward because the current going up the Tartar Strait, that's the Tartar Strait, the sea in which Moniron is found, that current, the Tsushima-Shio current, goes northward. But how could it have gotten down? Well, there is a current that is right near the west side of Sakhalin, and that is the only southerly current, and it takes it down And so KL-007 must have landed, must have set down or exploded by the Soviets to simulate falling from the sky east of Moniron, between Moniron and Sakhalin. That is the only place where there is a southern current. This is an illustration of the which was produced by the Russian-Japanese Peru Strait project. This is a research project of the two countries, which analyzed the average currents in the month of September. Now remember, the month of September is the month in which KL-07 was shot down. And that current coming down on the west side of Sakhalin Island is less than 2 miles an hour. It's a slow current, while the current from Japan approximately is the same way, but they both converge in the center. In the center, it is called the convergent current, and it goes through the Peru's Strait, or the Soya Strait in Japan. And this is a brisk current. It comes about 7-8 miles an hour. So it's a fast current. And if you can see, at the left is Moniron Island, and that's where the plane was shot down. And from Moniron Island to the tip of Sakhalin is 35 miles long. And so that 35 miles long is the area that the current of West Sakhalin went down, the slow current. And the maximum time that it would have taken for any debris to have gone down to that would have been 15 to 30 hours. 30 hours is the maximum time it would have taken to go. And from Sakhalin Island to Japan, to Wakanai Beach, was also 35 miles distance. And this was the brisk current, and going to 7-8 miles an hour. And the expected time that this would have taken from the tip of Sakhalin to Wakanai Beach was 4 to 5 hours. So the total time that it was expected for debris to wind up off the coast of Japan was from 19 to 35 hours, maximum 35 hours. Now here I've spoken about the 35 miles distance from the north of Moniron Island until the south point of Sakhalin Island, so it's 35 miles. But actually, the debris would have come down, would have flowed down from the center, where we believe, from testimony of fishermen, that KL-07 came down on the water, and it would have come down at on a straighter course, not from to the tip of Sakhalin Island, but sort of down in the center. So the time that was expected that it would come down would have been less than the 35 hours that I have specified by the chart. So then, the question we ask, why did the wreckage appear only after 8 days, that is 192 hours, rather than the maximum at 35 hours, and most probably less than that? We have to ask the question, why did the wreckage appear only after 8 days? Well, if you see here on the left, there is the map that was produced by the within the after action report of Commander Walter Piatti Jr. He was the commander of the Task Force 71 of the 7th Fleet. And here you can see the blue line, which is the coast of Sakhalin Island, and a circle around Moniron Island. And the red line represents the 12-mile claimed territorial Soviet waters. The Soviets claimed their territory and prevented the Allied force, the United States, Japan, and Korea, from entering into this area. And here you see that area that was prohibited of them is colored violet. And you see on the map a black shaded area that represents the 250 square miles which was searched by the United States and the Allied forces. And so if any of if there would be debris found in the international waters north of Moniron, it would have been caught in the current going northward of Muniron. So this raises the question, why was the United States search and rescue operation prohibited by the Soviet Union from entering its 12-mile claimed waters? Well, the answer is given to us in the words themselves of the Soviets, written to each other. The words of Dmitry Ustinov, defense minister, and Viktor Chebrakov, the head of the KGB, to Yuri Andropov, general secretary of the Soviet Union. And you can see here the words that their motivation. It was to disinform the United States and Japan. What was that? The search was simulated by them to disinform the United States and Japan. They already had the recorders in their own possession, and they say it shall be kept secret. And here they say that the United States and Japan have no information on the flight recorders, and that the goal is to prevent any disclosure of the information in the future. This was all written in November of 1983, within 2 months of the shoot-down. The commander of Task Force 71, Admiral Walter Piatti Jr., had his own estimate, his own evaluation of what the Soviets were doing. He believed it to be a harassing enterprise on the Soviets' part, and he spelled it out by saying it prevented ships towing search sensors from making good their program's search track. They cut the umbilicals, that is the cables that were towing the sensors of the deep drones. They were privy to and tried to prevent the collisions and the rammings that the Soviets were attempting to do, particularly on the Japanese auxiliary ships. And the Soviets were deliberately harassing in many, many other ways. The Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, in their draft report of 1991, had additional things to say about this. They pointed out the lock-ons of nuclear weapon systems that the Soviets employed on ships, the Petropavlovsk, their ship, their cruiser, and also by intelligence planes. Attempted boardings, they note the attempted boardings, particularly of the Chidori Maru number 5, Japanese auxiliary ships. And they note the overflights of Soviet nuclear bombers. Here we see photographs of the Soviet simulated search operation, which was in reality a harassing operation. And here you see the Soviet intelligence plane over the USS Elliott, a destroyer that was assisting in the search. And here you see the fleet tug Narragansett, which is being shadowed very, very closely by the Soviet Kara-class guided missile cruiser Petropavlovsk. That's how close they were. And here at the bottom picture, you see in the foreground 2 Soviet intelligence ships, which are shadowing the Narragansett again, and the USS Conserver. What then were the Soviets covering up? Well, there were no bodies on the surface of the sea, and there were no bodies below. And the divers that were sent down by the Soviets, but with the civilian divers, not the military divers which were sent down first, the civilian divers were amazed to find that within 2 weeks of KL-07 going down, there were no bodies and there were no suitcases or large bags. And here's the words of diver Popov: "I will confess that we felt great relief when we found that there were no bodies at the bottom. Not only no bodies, there were also no suitcases or large bags. I did not miss a single dive. I have quite a clear impression. The aircraft was filled with garbage, but there were really no people there. Why? Usually, when an aircraft crashes, even a small one, as a rule, there are suitcases and bags, or at least the handles of the suitcases. This by a diver who went down within 2 weeks of the shoot down, and amazed that he did not find what he expected to find." Here we see the shoes that the Soviets eventually handed over, which they claimed had come from drifts onto their territory. And there were shoes, there are over 300 shoes, some of them paired, some of them single, and they were identified by the relatives of the occupants of the plane as being the shoes that were worn by their loved ones when they went into the plane. And empty shoes without any signs of a foot in them or any flesh or any other human remains. Well then, where are the passengers and crew of KAL-007? Yes, there were no bodies because there were survivors. Larry was taken to Lubyanka KGB Central Prison in Moscow. And from there he was brought to Lefortovo military prison, which is also in the Moscow region, for continued interrogation. Very small cells filled with ice water and had only a single seat to lean against. Then he was brought to a dacha, summer house in Sukhanova near Moscow. And the reports are that he was probably drugged during the interrogations at that point. Then he was brought to Temirtau, which is a prison in Kazakhstan, once part of the Soviet Union, and then brought to Karaganda. Karaganda was a transit prison, and then all contact with his whereabouts was lost, 1995. How do we know this about Larry McDonald? We know this primarily by reports that have come in from Israel, from the Research Center for the prison camps that have been inaugurated in Israel, that went to Jesse Helms and were the basis of Jesse Helms' letter to Boris Yeltsin. And one of the ways was to send people from Israel that had been gulag inmates at one time to go back to those gulags. And among these efforts was this photograph that had been computer aged. You see the original photograph on the upper right of Larry McDonald, and then successfully it was overaged. It was aged by computer until the center photo came about, how he would have looked in 1995. This photo was shown to the wardens of the Temirtau prison in Kazakhstan, which it was the place that he was sent to from Karaganda and sent from Temirtau back to Karaganda transit prison. You see the scar that leads from his left nostril to the upper left lip. And this photo with that scar and age to what he would have been at the time at Temirtau was the reason that two wardens of Temirtau prison identified him as their probable prisoner. And here's other survivors, or one other survivor of this family. And this is Noel Ann Grenfell. She was 5 years old. She was the older of two daughters of the Grenfell family. And she wound up, according to the director of this school, at the medical school number 3 at Khabarovsk, which was in Siberia. And Senator Helms, who was in KL-015, which was 15 minutes after KL-007, and they had met together. Both planes had come down at Anchorage Airport. Remembers this girl. He taught her and her sister how to say "I love you" in deaf language, and they never forgot that. He never forgot that he turned around the corner and they stuck up their hands as they went back, boarded their plane, KL-015, and they told him in this sign language that he had taught them, "I love you." And he said he would never forget that. He wrote to us and told us this story as well. He's told it numerous times. The following slide has the pictures of some of the people of KL-007. Among these passengers and crew were 76 Koreans, 61 Americans, 28 Taiwanese, 23 Japanese, 16 Filipinos, and other nationalities. The crew members included the 3 flight deck officers, the captain, the co-pilot, first officer, and the engineer. There were 20 cabin attendants, and 6 repositioning KAL employees called deadheaders. There were 22 children aboard under the age of 12 years old, the youngest being Sammy, who was 8 months old.